Okay, it's hit.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, my name is Edward of Sky. I'm recently from Cade, now in Atlanta. And this is an expansion on a class I taught a couple of years ago on seasonal cooking. And I noticed something in Scapula, I'll get into later, that made me say, oh, I want to turn this into a bigger class. And it started out with, we all watch, or I assume a lot of us watch the modern food shows because there's not enough period cooking shows on television. And, they talk about the big trends lately, probably last decade, local cuisine, non-GMO, organic, and, fresh seasonal ingredients. Have we ever, that's, outside of the U.S., restaurants have been doing that, they never really stopped in a lot of cases. And if you look closely at the period cookbooks and household manuals, they address this directly or indirectly when they talk about different types of ingredients. Modern interstate trucking and refrigerators and freezers, and we don't have to pay as much attention to seasonality. But two of these modern trends are easy to dismiss. Organic food and non-GMO. We have, they didn't have modern chemicals and chemical fertilizers and pesticides that make things non-GMO for today's standards, or non-organic. It's been a day. As to the non-GMO or not, most people talk about lab-created modification. Now, if you want to talk about selective breeding as genetic modification, then yes, they did have quote-unquote, genetically modified organisms, but scientific breeding for traits didn't really happen until Gregor Mendel in the 19th century, when his monastery experiment on peas. So it was the selective breeding was a little bit more haphazard. They sort of knew, okay, this cow gives a lot of milk, so we're going to make sure to breed her to other cow to keep for more milk production, etc. But it wasn't really scientific. I've tried, one of my next research rabbit holes is looking into the period breeding habits to see if I can find more stuff, but I haven't found anything yet on, like when particular sheep breeds had come about and how they were derived. It's logical to assume that farmers are going to breed animals that are going to produce more meat or better quality meat, milk, and in the cases of sheep and goats and other animals that are used for their wool, when are you going to get this sheep produces better wool. But again, not very scientific or systematic yet that I've found. And also for like the milking animals, they're going to want to breed for, better behavioral traits. Now back to what started a lot of this is when I did the first seasonal class, I picked up the opera of Bartolomeo Scapi because, well, it's one of the classics. It's 1570 Rome. And he lists the season for meat, not just the seasons, but the months that are availability for, meat, poultry, vegetables, seafoods, sea fish, freshwater fish. And he does say that frequently say that, even out of season, many of the ingredients are available in Rome. For example, when discussing cuttlefish, their proper season begins in January and lasts till the end of March. In Venice and Rome, they are found almost any time. I decided to go through the book and made a six sheet workbook laying out, because he meant every first mention of an ingredient, he mentioned when it was available. So I went through the book and made this workbook that is on my website. And there's a link to that in the page, in the event page where I've listed, and it's the workbook and the notes that I'm reading from. Yeah, find the right mouse. I've got two computers going. Um, and so, in a later period stuff, and granted, Scappy was cooking for, originally was to cook for a Pope and Cardinals, so he's not going to cook the out of season stuff, but he knows that other people might have to. One of the other classics, Cindy Renfro's Take 1,000 Eggs or More, which is translation of two 15th century cookery books, the Harleian manuscripts, 279, 4018. In volume 1, on pages, there's a recipe for boucanade, which says, take fresh flesh, whatever it is, on page 142, 43, for evidence, they say, take pork or beef, whatever you like. Now, these are just two examples from the book, but while not as specific as Scappy as to what season the dishes should be cooked in, if you sort of use info from Scappy, you can see that they can be somewhat interpreted as seasonal. Now, Scappy says beef is in season May through September and pork from November through February. Now, it's 15th century versus late 16th century, and there's a latitude and therefore climate difference between Rome and England. So they're going to have definitely separate climate, but I think that general idea conveys of these recipes. His recipes are the two 15th century cookery book recipes are designed to be used with options for various seasons. Now, you can, for SCA purposes, we can use the information in Scappy to help construct harmonious dishes and menus, which is what he did. Since fresh beef is mentioned for February through September, and Turkish or hard squash is in season October through April, you wouldn't want to serve them together most of the year. You could stretch from mid-April to mid-May or mid-September through mid-October, but the results might not be as tasty. So, like if I was designing a feast, I wouldn't do beef with an acorn squash dish. Unless the season, weather allowed the season to overlap, especially for a high table, for the popes and cardinals, would you have served them together? Again, I suppose it would depend on who's doing the cooking and eating. Plus the exact local area. Southern Italy is going to be different than France, than Germany, than England. Where the seasons are going to be slightly different. The growing seasons will be slightly different. And Scapulex is cardinal and two popes, so he's on the cooking for the best. But a country household that's not super wealthy, they're not going to throw away food. So if they've got a late harvested squash or an early harvested cow or something, they're going to serve what they've got. A country landowner might need to eat something slightly out of season if it was available. Tossing food just because it wasn't exactly in season would be wasteful. Yes, you can feed it, the pigs will eat it as slop, but if it hasn't gone rotten, why not feed it to a human? Scappy included the months they were in season. Other as I mentioned, while other cookbooks included seasonal menus that guided the reader then and now as to what foods and meals were appropriate and when. Slightly post period, assuming that you're in a, I started playing in the mid 80s, so 600 to 1600, I haven't quite gotten that completely out of my mind. So why don't we call it a slightly post period? Why don't we go to very later period? William Rubisha, The Whole Body of Cookery Dissected, um, has bills of fare for flesh and fast days, which is going to be the church determining what days you're going to eat what kind of things. Um, the French Cook by La Varenne, which is 1653, has seasonal menus, both regular season plus Lenten recipes and recipes for general fish and flesh days. Robert May, again, he was 1642, if I remember correctly. The Accomplished Cook includes menus for specific days, such as New Year's Day and All Saints' Day. Some of the proteins and sides are similar on the dishes, but there are differences in the seasonal menus for some of the sub dishes. Many of the sauces and condiments, such as mustards, were common throughout the seasons because if you've made a mustard, it's vinegar and mustard seed and a few other things, so it's gonna survive even without refrigeration. Um, Eleanor Fettiplace's recipe book, which was 1604, goes beyond even seasonality and goes back to similar to Scappi, and the book is divided month by month by month, saying when they should be um, dishes should be prepared. About 10 years ago, I did a translation of the 1575 edition because there are multiple editions or multiple books titled A Proper New Book of Cookery. And I noticed, both kinds of timing. In the introduction, there's reference to church season, and there's a recipe called to make stewed broth for capons, mutton, beef, or any hot meat, which I can interpret that, as a humoral theory type thing, and also a broth for all manner of fresh fish. In other words, called a pike sauce for pike, bream, perch, roach, carp, eels, flukes, and all manner of brook fish. Now, 1575, within 5 years of Scappi, so so if you look at the different types of fish or the different types of meat, they're pretty much able to be cooked all throughout the year. Ingredients in similar to the ingredients which I talked about above, but getting out of cookbooks into household manuals. The Book of Carving by Wynkyn de Worde, which is an Elizabethan manual for a man for his manservant, has seasonal menus and church seasons even farther. Took it even farther. There are sections titled, "Here begins the feast from Pentecost," so a church season, until midsummer. From the feast of St. John the Baptist until Michaelmas. From the feast of St. Michael until the feast of Christmas. So it really mixes what things are cooked, what menus to be cooked when. Then there is, the household manuals that were typically written by or for the husband to his wife. Manuals, in addition to the recipes, had instructions on how the woman was expected to run the household, and they're generally, they're written as letters to the wife, so it's how he wants it done. The Good Housewife's Guide or the Ménage de Paris is a French manual written in several articles through sections to the author's wife in section 2.2, the horticulture section, and I'm willing to bet that 2.2 is what the modern translator called it. Explains not only when to plant different vegetables, but also when to eat them. April, note that throughout the month of April and May, you are to plant the green vegetables that are eaten in June and July. So there's a very specific growing and planting season. There are also instructions on topping the summer vegetables, leaving the roots in the ground so that they can put out shoots for next year. Based on the number of sunchokes growing in our garden in our new house in Virginia, yes, they will definitely do that. The author also mixes calendar months and church dishes. For church date, you need to sow green vegetables from April to St. Magdalene's Day. In the menus section a little bit later, he talks about menus for flesh and fish days, but also how to tell the ages of different types of meat, how many cuts of meat you can expect from different parts of various animals, and only useful for Paris at the time period, how much it should cost. Gervase Markham's The English Housewife, very similar to Good Wife's Guide, right household duties in different sections. The section on cookery starts with discussion of herbs and when to plant them, describing things to be planted in the new moon of each month from February to August. Again, it's a very seasonal, very planned pattern. Description of feasts. Later in the section, he states, for a more humble feast, because he gives a description of one feast, and for a more humble feast, it must hold limitation, which is provision and the season of the year. The summer affords what winter wants, and winter is master of that which summer can but with difficulty have. So it's a very direct talking about some things just aren't available all year round. So it's, direct instruction, cook what's good, it's the feast, cook what's good now. Markham covers more than cooking in the manual. In the section on wool, hemp, flax, and cloth, states that you should break the ground at the end of February and again at the end of April when you should sow the hemp and flax. In the section on dairies, it states the best time for a cow to calf is the latter end of March into April because the increase in spring grass will have the greatest increase in the amount of milk. It then discusses what to do with the calves born in other times of the year. Sue Platt Delights for Ladies, not truly a household manual, but talks about when different main ingredients such as quinces and damsons, which is type of plum, Anne Hagen in her Anglo-Saxon book talks about regional and seasonal variations, distinguishing between coastal districts and those near freshwater rivers and lakes. Also mentions types of grain grown in different regions of the country. So again, it's all very regional, very local. This is from the Anglo-Saxon period in England up through the 16th century. Peter Breers in Tudor and Early Stuart England, talks about, in a section on brewing, talks about, local beers being better for every day, but sometimes you need to import the fancy stuff for guests that might want to prefer what they have local to their area. Talking about, different types of breads in different regions. Gianna Volker Bach, who taught earlier today, discusses crop rotations and communal fields, but also small garden plots for individual people But they also had, starting in the 1500s, there were cattle drives into Germany from Jutland and Frisia and Hungary, with butchers maintaining their own field, their own stockyard, similar to Kansas City, St. Louis, Chicago. Whereas other people talked about, people in the city bring food back and forth from their country house to their city house. So, yeah, a lot of what the restaurants are trying to do these days are what their cookbooks are pushing, is stuff that, has been a period, it has been a period practice. So, what they're doing now isn't anything that those of us that study period cooking haven't already done. So, that's kind of it. So, anybody have questions, comments?
Can you close the door? Can you close the door? Okay. I apologize. I'm super late. I was here at the beginning, and then I got a call from another person who had to go take that to talk about some stuff. Is there a way I can get the notes for your class? I'm so sorry.
Yeah, if you look at the event website, I made a post that has the link to my webpage that has
Gotcha.
the notes.
Cool. When did you come to Atlantia? How long have you been here?
We pulled in literally the Friday night of Rip Rap War last year.
Okay, all right. I was like, there are 2 Atlanteans teaching classes, and I haven't met them yet, and I feel sad because I'm the emergency deputy Kingdom Minister of Arts and Sciences, and I usually try to get around to meet everybody I can. So
no, we moved in, we bought a house, and then we got into lockdown.
Gotcha.
We're down here in we're on the peninsula. We're in Sheridan, my wife and I.
Excellent. So you know Khalib and Lloyd, I hope.
Yes.
Yeah. Khalib's in my household.
I get stabbed by Lloyd quite frequently when we had practice.
Excellent. So that's a good person to get stabbed by.
Yeah. My wife's a stuffed laurel. I'm because she got her laurel. I would be polite not mention how many years ago. But the West did not declare a specialty, and I've got Kaizen awards for cooking and costuming. So
cool.
And I'm just rebuilding the website that I had before, so not all the old articles are up yet.
Cool. So I really wanted to call. I'm working on a way to include everybody in events, and the archery people have figured it out. The ANS people have figured it out. The fighting people have not yet. So I've been chatting with a bunch of different people trying to come up with some sort of virtual activities for combat, rapier and heavy, so they can feel like they're part of the event. And I finally got 10 minutes to chat with Magnus Tyndall from up in the East. And so I had to run over and chat with him, and I came back and I missed your class.
Kaida's done it with dice, roll a die, and roll a 4-sider, and this is the quadrant you block, and this is the quadrant that you attack. And if you block the attack, it wasn't good. If you block high and the attack is low, then you lose a leg. Yeah. It's it's what they came up with on short notice.
Oh, I got you. Yeah. So I'm just trying to hit a bunch of people that I know and have known for years that are active to see if any of my ideas actually float, or they should be sunk before anybody else hears them. So, but look, now I've taken over your class. I'll shut up now. I'm sorry.
No, I've run through the notes, and now it's for questions on the class. So quick scan through the notes and ask questions. Does anybody else have any questions? You are allowed to unmute your microphones.
None here. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Great to meet you. Sorry I came in late.
It happens. You know.
I have found your notes, and I also see at the top that you teach this at Atlantean University, so maybe I'll be able to hook into it there.
I forgot to hit the record button at university.
Oh, well, I'm going out on a limb, knowing most people who live in Atlantia, and going to say you might teach it again.
I've got other research projects I'm working on that'll probably get taught before this one gets taught again.
Cool. Right. Well, then I will have to dig through all the notes. I found them. I went over to the things I wrote and found the blog post. Thank you.
Not a problem.
Have a great day.
You too. So if nobody else has any questions, why don't we call it, let people get a drink before the last class.
Okay. Also, if you could, in the chat, if you could pop your email in there for me, I can send you a link to the recording.